I think the best way to describe this episode of The Mandalorian, episode 3 of season 2, chapter 11, as the Dave Filoni deep cut. Like, this is, if I think it stands on its own if you've not watched Clone Wars or Rebels, and I do want to get into that because there's so many nods and references in this episode to the animated stuff. A matter of fact, you could arguably say this is an absolute continuation of Filoni's animation, but I think it does a good enough job of explaining everything for the audience who's not familiar with those properties, which is the majority of the audience, to be completely honest. Do you think that? What do you guys think? I'm Brian here with Spencer and Larry, and yeah, this is Pulp Mythos, and we're going to be discussing this episode of The Mandalorian. But yeah, that was one of my first thoughts, because I know, like, everyone I know, like my parents and sister and people who are going to be watching this episode, they're not going to be familiar with any of these references or characters. Do you think it did a good enough job explaining?
I don't think that it had to fully go into any explanation at this point, because I think that The Mandalorian itself, they're trying to set up other shows. So this may be just kind of a teaser. And we had mentioned it right before we started talking about, kind of dipping their toes in the water to see what other properties might be successful, what other properties might help. I do know, just because I looked it up, isn't the girl who played Bo-Katan's voice in Rebels, isn't that her?
Yes, Katie Sackhoff, or Starbuck in BSG.
Cool. Yeah, because I was like, when I heard her voice, I was thinking, they picked an awfully good person to do this, and then I looked at it, oh shit.
Do you guys, now I'm a fan, I'm a big Battlestar Galactica fan, and she was also appeared in the most recent Riddick film, and I thought she was great in that. But I stand by, she should have been Captain Marvel. I don't want to go into that a whole lot, but just basically, I remember when they were casting, and Bree's fine, she was okay, but I remember thinking this should have been Captain Marvel. But
when they announced the movie, that was my first thought. That was the first person who came to mind when they announced they were doing a Captain Marvel film. Yeah, so yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, but I will say, as far as your previous question also, of whether, like, of the setup and the characters from other properties, be it the Clone Wars or Rebels or whatever, it was done well in a way that there's an air of mystery, but not too much mystery to the point where you don't know what's going on. You still can follow it if you don't know of those other properties, or okay, there's these other factions here, and we have the name of a Jedi, and there's different Mandalorians. It kind of establishes these things for you if you aren't a fan of those other things. And for old fans, there's a bit of there's a lot of references and throwbacks. Like, instead of it being a mystery, you're like, oh, okay, I recognize Bo-Katan from Clone Wars, from Rebels. It does a good job of introducing, I think, these characters and these concepts for anyone who's unfamiliar, while still, throwing in those neat little references for longtime fans or fans of the extended Star Wars universe, without alienating anyone who's just coming into The Mandalorian.
And I'm just going to rattle off a lot of these things directly. So, we're going to go right into as far as the Dave Filoni stuff. Mando finds himself on the water planet. He's not reintroducing, but bringing the frog lady back to her husband so that he can fertilize the eggs. And he ends up on a ship. They screw him over. They're trying to get his armor. And 3 Mandalorians show up, one of them being Bo-Katan. And this, like I said, this is a very important character in the Clone Wars cartoon, because she was in Death Watch as well, which is interesting. She didn't... I wonder if her partners are aware of that, but she was, in fact, in Death Watch. Now, Death Watch got all crazy because Darth Maul ended up taking over, and it split into like 2 factions. There's a lot to watch and go to, I'm not going into all that here, but basically she is the heir to the throne of Mandalore, but she needs the Darksaber, and Gideon has that, and so she's on a quest to not only get the Darksaber, but go back to their home world and retake it. Sasha Banks is in this. She is not Sabine. Everybody thought she was going to be Sabine. She's actually an original character. I think it's like Casca or something.
See, that was my question because I didn't know. I thought she might be Sabine.
I looked it up. Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about that online. She's an original character, original creation. So Sabine's still out there, as far as we know. Not saying she couldn't pop up at some point. And then the other guy, I can't remember his name, but he was also a brand new character. So those two characters were brand new, but Bo-Katan was not. That whole action sequence was absolutely amazing. The introduction of the Mandalorians, and then the whole idea of Death Watch. Mando doesn't take his helmet off. They did, and they refer to him as being a child of the Watch, which is a reference to Death Watch, which is an extremist organization that the Mandalorians had become pacifists right before the Clone Wars, and then shit went crazy. But basically, you had a group called Death Watch who was like, "No, we want to go back to the old ways, back before the wars with the Jedi and stuff, like thousands of years in the past."
Yeah, and there's a number of traditions from that era that they want to hold on to, such as the not taking off their helmets and everything, and a lot of the traditions that the Mandalorian that we see he follows. But Mandalore had become something very, very different during the period of the Clone Wars, and that's the tradition that the Mandalorians that we were introduced in this episode that they come from. The most recent incarnation of what a Mandalorian has been. Like it was neat to see that still exists, because until this point we weren't sure whether the Death Watch version, the oldest traditional version of a Mandalorian, whether that was the only kind that exists. So it was neat to see them touch on that. I was curious, whether we would get that in this series, or if it was the case that we only had the type of Mandalorian that the Mandalorian that we follow, seems to be in this series.
Well, and he wasn't born into that. He was saved by the Mandalorian. So it's kind of interesting to show that all of these beliefs were taught to him. He wasn't brought up in a household that believed this, or his father was part of Death Watch. This was all taught to him by the people who saved him from the droids. So I would be interested to see maybe finding out who it was that trained him, who it was that found him. I think that would be kind of a cool little tie-in also.
That is a good point. I hadn't even thought about that. The fact that we haven't seen the Mandalorians that took him in, whether there's a sense of responsibility, or if he was just, overall raised by their clan, or, so it'd be interesting to see, like you said, how strict are they, with the Death Watch beliefs and culture. And I'm curious if his current clan of Mandalorians would view him as a heretic for even working with Bo-Katan and her group.
That's a great question, because you're right. We know the way they scoffed at the, oh, he's a child of the Watch. Clearly there's division amongst the Mandalorians, which is sort of strange to me, because the Purge, kicked their ass so bad that they're, scattered. They're not organized. You would think they would come together, which is what Bo-Katan wants to do. She wants to get everybody together and say, no, let's unite. But I'm curious if there's been any has she dealt with any of the leadership, in the Watch, and are we going to get any of that this episode? I mean, not this episode, but this season, or is that being set up for future seasons or other shows? The politics of the Mandalorians.
Well, they also showed at the beginning the recap part of the episode where they were both in the little foundry or whatever, and I don't remember the forger's name, the lady who was forging all the equipment. If she asked both of them when he was fighting that bigger Mandalorian, it's like, have either one of you ever removed your helmet? And they both said no. So it was very interesting to see that, they made a big point of showing that part. They made a big point of it being very important that neither one of them had shown their face.
Yeah, and they were doing a lot of, just with their back and forth and everything, they were doing a lot of checking each other, you know, like just to make sure that they've maintained those traditions and everything. And they all, like everyone in that group, seemed to have very strictly held their idea of what a Mandalorian is. So it's interesting to say, and I will say this is a nice follow up, given that not too long ago, while I haven't seen much of the series, I did see and I think you two may have viewed it as well, the season finale, well, the final season of the Clone Wars, even though I haven't seen much of the series, and it kind of takes place well before a lot of this, but it feels like a neat little follow-up, given that there are characters that certainly tie to this season of The Mandalorian. And this is a thing that I think George Lucas did well with a lot of the extended media when it came to the Clone Wars and that era of thing, or when he was focusing on an era or a period of time, that he tried to make sure that those things sort of tied together. That last season kind of ties very well into what we're watching now with The Mandalorian, to the point where it feels like it was very much intentional that they had that last season, and then and we saw those characters and where they wound up towards the end of the Clone Wars, and then we jump back to The Mandalorian, and now we're seeing them currently in the time frame of The Mandalorian, where they are several years in the future.
Yeah,
sorry. I was gonna say, I don't know if that's so much a high five to Lucas or Filoni. Like, it's I think that Dave's done a great job making sense of everything.
Yeah, this is legitimately this specific episode is a continuation of the animated stuff. Absolutely, I completely agree.
Well, yeah, it's a high five to both in the way, because I'm just saying he's following, and they're following in kind of that tradition. The one thing, as much as I dislike the prequels,
there's no positive Lucas talk on this channel. There, I'm joking.
It's not allowed. But yeah, as much as I dislike the prequels, that's one thing that he definitely did well, is weave a world around it. With the extended media, with the cartoons, with the books and everything, to the point where you really got a good feel of you got a good general idea of what was going on in that era, and you got many different perspectives outside of the movies, to the point where, despite the quality of the movies and despite how people may have felt about it, you went into that experience excited, because you're like, oh, I know of this character and I know of that and these other, even though he dropped the ball with this one, you're like, General Grievous is going to be in this one. He was so cool in the cartoons and the books. It kind of creates this overall picture of the world that gives you a good idea and makes you excited for other Star Wars related media. And I'm saying, they're doing this just as well, if not better, in a number of ways than he did.
Well, and I think too, me and Brian had talked about this at work one day, where the younger generation, those 15 to 25-year-olds love the prequels. But I don't know that it's so much that they love the prequels, but without the Clone Wars cartoon and the Rebels cartoon, the prequels wouldn't have been as successful, I don't think. And I think with those things that kind of explain Anakin, for people to love Anakin the way they do, it's, I think, 100% on Dave Filoni's shoulders. I think that Lucas had decent ideas. I don't necessarily agree with the execution of the prequels, but that's neither here nor there. I think that Dave Filoni has done a great job, and I think that Favreau working with him is a brilliant idea, because they kind of keep the continuity. They kind of keep the feel of the cartoons, which were extremely successful. So I think that it's just a different vibe, and I really like it.
Yeah, and as far as the beginnings of the Clone Wars cartoon, Lucas was instrumental in that. I mean, him and Filoni worked together, developing Ahsoka. He was a part of the Clone Wars cartoon. Now he was gone by Rebels, so I don't think he had anything to do with that.
Yeah, but George picked Filoni if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
He did.
He handpicked him. You're right. Yeah.
See, that I didn't know.
Filoni had worked on a bunch of other animated projects, including, I believe, Avatar.
Yeah.
And so, he had developed sort of a name, and I forget what else he had worked on, but he had worked on a bunch of, successful animated projects and shown that, he was really, understood animation and telling a good story and character development. And so, yeah, Lucas wanted him. He came in, and if you've ever seen any interviews with him, I don't think there's anyone that loves Star Wars more than him. He really loves Star Wars and really understands it, I think. And so the Clone Wars, although it did have hiccups in the beginning, as it went on, it got pretty damn good. And I thought was really solid. So, it is cool seeing the live action version of what he was trying to do in animation. I'm very excited for episode 5 this season because we know it's his episode, and we'll jump. Fuck it, let's jump to that. So we've been all over the place. It doesn't matter. Next week is episode 4, right? Well, we know Filoni's episode is episode 5. We know that Bo-Katan told him, "Hey, there is a Jedi. You can go find. Her name is Ahsoka Tano." Well, my assumption is he's going to get distracted again next week, and he's going to not get to her. Or maybe he'll get to her at the end of the episode. I don't know.
I got to agree with you.
Do you think that's a good decision for them to do, if that is in fact how it plays out, that they make us wait an extra week? What do you think about that? Now, I could be wrong. Maybe he does find her, but it looks like that's not going to be the case.
Well, the ship's a wreck, so I doubt he will at that point. He's going to have to stop somewhere along the way, and who knows what we'll encounter. But I'm assuming we're going to have to wait at least one more week before he even gets to the world, where she's located, because the ship is in such bad condition.
I think that he may be looking in episode 4 a place to fix his ship correctly, because he doesn't feel that because he said it, he was just like the Mon Calamari, basically fucked his ship up. He hated what they did to it. So now they made it to where it worked, but they didn't do a very good job. And I think whatever the next episode is him going to be trying to get his ship fixed correctly, so that way it's effective if he were to get in another pursuit or, have to flee or run away, because, all of his systems are messed up. In the previous episode, when they said you can't use hyperspace, it ruined, any chance of him being able to escape or run away, because he was, that's what he does best, is stay out of trouble, stay off the radar. But they took all of those abilities away by his ship being as trashed as it was. So I think in episode 4, he's basically going to try and get his ship fixed, or maybe get a new ship. And then episode 5 will be the Ahsoka.
And we are going to go back into the episode and discuss more of the plot lines. But since we're on Ahsoka, what the hell do you think she's doing? Because that was one of my thoughts. I'm like, it's been a while. This is post Return of the Jedi, so all the trilogy has occurred at this point. She wasn't around during the trilogy. We know she had an encounter with Vader in the past, as Vader. We know she was trained by Anakin. We know her history, but where the hell has she been doing all these years? Does she consider herself a Jedi at this point, or no? She didn't seem to for a while, but she sort of always rides that fence. What do you think?
Just to clarify, also for anyone who hasn't seen the cartoons or anything, by encounter you mean like a battle with Vader, and
yes.
She's worked with the rebellion, as a very integral part of it on a lot of their more covert missions and whatnot. So, and the character's always kind of had a push towards the light, and there's always been a good character, but it's had pushes away from the Jedi Order as well. So it's a good point. She may not view herself as a Jedi. She may not view herself as the person who's right to train this child. And let me see, she seemed she was older than any of the characters in Rebels by the time that happened. She was like the senior Jedi that they were looking to for guidance. So my question let me see, how old would Ahsoka be during all this? Like, would she be like, because she knows Yoda for one, and she might say to herself like, it takes these things like 500 years to grow to maturity. So like, I don't have that much time.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Like she may have a better idea of the child's lifespan and how long it would take to raise and have it gain an understanding of the Force than the Mandalorian would. So we may encounter a situation where it's better that the child is with him.
Well, and each species, they age a little differently. Like Yoda's species, whatever they were, aged very slowly. But I don't know if they talk about like Twi'leks or the Mon Calamari. I don't know how they age. Like, I don't know if at 50 that's the same as us being at 20. Like, I have no idea.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I don't know.
And therein lies the problem.
If you do know, and put that in the comments, if like there's a chart or some kind of reference point to map how people age within the different species.
Well, yeah, and Ahsoka might be like, look, my species only lives about 35 years, and I'm on average, and I'm 38. He's like, good luck to you. It's hard to say, but.
And was that Ahsoka at the beginning in the cloak? Or were we supposed to assume?
No, that was Sasha Banks.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Because all I saw was like the bottom of the face, and then that was it. And then they disappeared. So I didn't. And I thought that I had heard that Ahsoka was supposed to be Rosario Dawson. So.
Yeah, and when you got that quick flash, you kind of thought, oh, is that her? But. Well,
it was strange. She was wearing. Now, it was definitely Sasha Banks, but yeah, she was wearing like Jedi robes. That was odd. Her choice of dress.
Yeah, and I guess cloaks aren't exclusive to the Jedi, but
it was usually the way it was. Yeah, but even the way it laid and everything. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it was like sort of heavily draped and everything, like the cloaks that you usually see the Jedi wear and everything. So that led me to think, oh, we're gonna get Ahsoka in this episode. When you saw the quick flash, and then clearly it was the remnants of the Mandalorians from that we were following in the Clone Wars.
The frog people. So they have their they're having their eggs and everything. They watched Baby Yoda in the episode. And that was sort of what he did. He had a lot of fun things with his food attacking him, which I thought was a turn from what happened last week. I don't want to go too much. There's a lot of feelings online about it, and I really don't want to go into it a whole lot, but I do want to bring it up. The egg eating thing was a legitimate controversy.
Well, we talked about it last week.
Yeah, but it has exploded throughout the course of the week.
Baby Yoda canceled.
It was. I mean, there were articles that stated that like it was a thing, and I think it's calmed down now after this episode, but I don't know.
Well, honestly, I don't know. Like, I didn't really read any of the articles, so I don't know what to say about it because I'm not sure how serious they were for. A
lot of it revolved around women who had I don't know the term, so I'm not women who were trying to have children, and so the different procedures in which the eggs are harvested, and it's a whole very difficult procedure that some women go through, but some found really offensive, were offended by this. There was a whole thing, but not so much. I don't want to so much talk about that as much as I want to talk about like even Disney responded, but they sort of responded a little crudely. It was a lot of social media back and forth on this.
Well, I will respond what I think what we've seen over the last two episodes with this, what I feel that was about, and I feel that as someone who understands what he was doing, you were, as the audience, meant to be a little or more than a little appalled with it. and but it was about him understanding the nature of his actions and learning to understand that, because at first he only saw it as a food source to benefit him, but in this episode he sees one hatch and he gains an understanding for what it is that he's eating.
So you're saying they should have waited for the full story arc to play out and to see where they were going with it.
Well, yeah, and I figure that's where they were going with it anyway. But since we were left with that one episode, I can see a lot of people thinking that it's just as I described it, last week. That Disney was just trying to present us with a cute genocide. It was like, oh, it's Baby Yoda mindlessly eating those eggs. But I assumed last week that this was the story we were going for. But I thought it was over because I didn't think we were going to get more of it this week. I thought maybe we'd get them dropping her off on the planet, and that'd be the last we saw this character. But this whole thing is about shaping the identity of Baby Yoda, or the child, and his understanding of life, and how sacred it is, or how it should be treated. Because we've seen the both bad or good, for better or worse, the Mandalorian's actions and the people around him are shaping who this powerful Force user is going to be and how he views life. And it's more about that than anything.
And before, Spencer, you go in, what do you think about Disney's response? That was another part of it. Like, you had the controversy, but then Disney sort of had some crude responses. Should Disney ever respond to these kinds of things, or what do you think would be in their best interest, as far as a controversy about a Muppet eating eggs? I mean, I'm
simplifying it, but yeah,
simplifying it, but that's what it was. Like, if they had never responded, it might have went away quick. That was my thinking. I wonder if they had just not responded, if they were just like, whatever, wait out a week. But because they responded, I think that's why you still were getting articles all the way up to the premiere of this episode.
Well, and I think that happens when people now are so quick to jump on, not a bandwagon, but jump to someone's defense, or be offended because everything is so instantaneous now. If I was upset 20 years ago, and because we talked about this, Brian, the letter campaigns that you had to write to basically get a show in trouble, or
you had to commit, man. It took weeks.
But that's what I'm saying. So when back in the, I don't mean like back in the day, like hundreds of years ago, but not that long ago,
20 years
before social media, you had to organize a kind of movement to get these kind of things addressed. And now I think with people having such quick access to social media, that they didn't wait for the whole story to unravel. They're just like, well, I'm mad that they did it like this, or I'm offended because they did this. There is not ever a time where someone's not going to get offended. And I'm not trying to take away, trying to minimize somebody's feelings, because if someone was in that situation, I'm sure that they it bothers them, or that it may offend them. But drug use, if you know somebody who OD'd, or a family member, like that may bother you more than somebody who hasn't. But to me, that should not affect how I view a story. But a lot of people it does, and that's okay. Everyone has their feelings about certain issues, and to me, this the way they tried to portray it, I didn't feel, but I'm not a female who's gone through any of this either. So, but how they were trying to portray it is not how I perceived the outcry to be. Like, I didn't see it the same way that those people did.
Yeah. That, I think that was a good way to put it. I will admit it. I think we talked about it last week on our review. It was surprising to me. It was uncomfortable, but nothing really offends me. So I was like, whatever. I was surprised they went there with it. They probably regret it now, But I do agree with you, Larry. If when you watch this episode and you bring it all together as one, you're like, okay, there was actually a story arc there of Baby Yoda learning about shit, learning about life, learning about things. Like there was a point to it now that we've got the full story.
Well, yeah, and I think that was the problem, is that it looked like it ended there.
It was just
well,
as
for
a
like
joke, just sort of a dart humor.
and that's what it appeared to be if we took it as, like I thought it was going to go last week, where you just drop off there at where you just end with the previous episode. We didn't know that it would follow up into this episode and that there would be a lesson learned, but I think we all assumed that there would be a lesson learned by the end of the episode. The previous episode, so and that's kind of where and why we got the controversy that we did with this one.
And I think you look at who he has spent a vast majority of his time with. The Mandalorian looks out for the Mandalorian, but he's also been looking out for Baby Yoda, or the baby, or the child, or whatever they're calling it. I think that he's seeing a lack of compassion on the Mandalorian's part. Like, he's watching him, get this group together to take out this other creature. Now, as a child, he doesn't understand that the Mandalorian is being compassionate. He is, giving a shit about that whole town. When he helped Timothy Oliphant take out, the dragon thing, and
Crate dragon.
Yeah, and how he was talking to the Tusken Raiders. He has a relationship with all these people, but as a child, he doesn't understand that yet. But he also sees the Mandalorian kill pretty indiscriminately. Like, he's killing everything and everyone. So I think in the baby's mind, he's just hungry and he doesn't understand what he's doing. So in this episode, he gains some understanding, which a child does. Like, as they progress and mature, they kind of gain more understanding. So I think that that's where the story was trying to go.
Right.
But people jumped on it a little bit quicker than Disney probably anticipated.
And it's the sort of thing where it's like, yeah, from his perspective, because he's not, he hasn't gained that level of intelligence yet. To him, it's an egg. It's a container of eggs. To him, so he's like, I've eaten eggs before. These are food. He's like, we've seen him pick up frogs and other things, and just kind of eat them. He had no idea that it's like, oh, this is like, these are this frog woman's, these are her children. He hasn't gained the level of, like you said, intelligence or compassion to understand that yet. And we're seeing him during the point in his life where he's learning to understand those things.
And one last point to this whole conversation, another argument that I think compounded why it was probably such a big thing. People were bringing up, well, Mando slayed this crate dragon. He killed that rhino thing in season 1 for its egg. Sort of building this pattern of like, because some people, I've read it on Twitter, they're like, what are they trying to say on this show about women and their children? You know what I mean? Like, there's this weird thing that's been, people were looking at the whole, 2 seasons. So I don't know. It rubbed some people the wrong way. It became a whole conversation. Even watching the episode, like I said, I thought it was dark humor, but I did not think it would have the legs it had this week.
Well, honestly, yeah, because when I said the whole thing about Disney trying to make like a little adorable genocide, with Baby Yoda, they're playing it for comedy, but like, it's darker than it appears to be. And when we discussed that, I did not think that it would turn into a series of headlines. I thought maybe one other venue might pick up on that. You may hear it from like an IGN or something, but yeah, like you said, I didn't think that would had the legs that it was going to have. It was amazing, how many articles I saw throughout the week about this.
Yeah, it was crazy. Another dark humor moment, which made me laugh, when the Imperials were blown out the space dock in the on the Imperial ship. the Mandalorians were in there, and they're just like, "Where are they? They're in the control room." He's like, "They're where?" And they blow them out and kill those guys. They killed so many damn stormtroopers in this episode. Like, it got comical at one point. I was like, "Damn." I thought the Imperials did a great job. The performances were great. Let's talk about Gideon's control over this particular faction of Imperial. Long live the Empire. His top guy knew what needed to be done, and he did it. He killed his pilots. He was going to crash the ship, and then when he was captured, he took his own life. Very dark storytelling. Very disturbing in some ways, but it was showing Gideon has that same influence and power that maybe the Emperor or Vader had. As far as people fearing him within the Empire. I want more Gideon. I want more about him. Hopefully we get more. What did y'all think about all that stuff with the Empire?
It reminded me a lot of Tarkin, the way that they kind of portrayed him, because even when Vader was walking around, when Tarkin would say something, everybody seemed to listen.
True, even Vader.
Yeah. So when I look at the respect that these Moffs are commanding, Moff Gideon is not any different. And I think that these people, whatever his end game is, which we're not 100% sure of just yet, whatever his main objective is, all these people are on board. So I would like to get a couple more hints. Like you said, I want more Moff Gideon, but I want to know what his end game is. I want to kind of get a couple hints as to what his plans are.
Why does he want the child? Where does that all lead?
Well, yeah, and I do like that we got that. And the thing is, because I think it's good that they showed that, because this is after after Episode 3 of Star Wars, the Empire didn't just disappear overnight. You have these pockets, you have these true believers in their system that would stick around, and we're getting that with the smaller Star Wars stories and things that we're getting from the Mandalorian, and it's neat to see where they are. That that necessarily just because it's over because they suffered this major loss, there's we got to see early on in season 1 of the Mandalorian where it looked like, oh, there's in complete shambles. It's like some of them, depending on where they are, but like we see with Moff Gideon, like we see with this particular faction. Some of them are still living quite comfortably, depending on what pocket of space they're residing in or ruling over. They the stormtroopers we saw season 1 at the beginning before Gideon showed up. They looked like they were in shambles. Their armor was dirty. They looked like they suffered a major loss. But some of these other stormtroopers and Imperial officers and stuff we're seeing, they look like they're surviving okay, and like they're legitimately going to be a challenge, for like the Mandalorian or whoever's opposing them in this period,
I think that's a good point though that you just made. You said different pockets of space. So when we were talking about Ahsoka just a moment ago, we don't know where this planet that they just mentioned where she's at. I have no idea how far away from Yavin 4 and like all of these main areas that is. I'm sure that her being a Force user, she can kind of sense disturbances in the Force. She can kind of see that, but unless she's trained in that kind of stuff, she may not be in a position where she know exactly what was going on. So we're talking about where she's been during this last 20 years. I don't know. And I don't know how far away she is, why she kind of isolated herself. I don't know. And I think that that's a very interesting, probably thing that they're going to go into once we finally get some more on her. But I think that it is interesting that we don't know where this planet is. We don't know. Well, somebody might. I mean, I'm sure that there's, if I Wikipedia it, I would know where it is, but I didn't do that. So how far away it is.
I want to go into, I'm pretty much through as far as talking about the episode, unless there's something you want to talk about. But there is something else I want to talk about.
Well, I just want to mention while we were talking about that small group of the group of Imperials we saw in this episode, I thought it was pretty funny. Just hearing the perspective of the stormtroopers while they're radioing in. It's like and they're just like, what are their forces like? And they're like, oh, there's at least like 10 guys, and then the guy in the comms room is just like, there's only 4 of them. We're only picking up 4.
Yeah. The future of Star Wars, we know there's going to be more shows. So on December 10th, I believe it's the 10th, Disney's got a lot of major announcements they're going to make. It's supposed to be a big deal. They're going to announce the future of Disney Plus and some other things they have going on. They admitted at their this past week they were doing their, I don't know, speaking to their investors or whatever, and they admitted that they realize they see a correlation between new content on Disney Plus and an increase in subscribers. It's like, gee, really? You mean if you have content that you'll get, so the thing is, what will that content be going forward? They've spaced out they don't have a lot as far as this finished. We have WandaVision got pushed to next year, and that's it. There's nothing else right now. But the rumor is there's a whole bunch of shows that are about to go into production. We know they're doing an Obi-Wan series. The rumor about Boba Fett is, we've been hearing that for weeks now, that he's going to get a show. There's now rumors, that maybe it could be Ahsoka could get a show, Bo-Katan could get a show. There was a rumor that Thrawn was going to get a show several months ago. We don't know. We're assuming we're going to get some of those answers on the 10th. My question to you guys is, what would you want to see, and do you think there could be too much of a good thing? Like, in other words, if you had the Mandalorian and a Boba Fett and a Bo-Katan, do you think that'd be too much Mandalorian stuff? Do you think it needs to be spaced out more where, okay, Ahsoka would be a good, Force user show. We have the Mandalorian show. Maybe a Thrawn show would be sort of like a more space combat stuff. You could do different genres within Star Wars. How would you want to see it?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that brings me back to something I don't think we brought up yet, is the fact that we potentially set up other shows or potentially a B plot for this show in this episode, with the introduction of the new Mandalorians, with them discussing taking back Mandalore. I imagine we're going to touch on that, be it with this show or a show focusing on Bo-Katan. But like you said, hopefully they don't spread it thin, and you can only follow so many Mandalorians before it feels kind of, samey. So if they do something else, I would want a different perspective. Like, let's say if we're following Bo-Katan, then I'd want it to be a full-on, war to take back Mandalore. If the Mandalorian himself isn't following that, if we're keeping this on the level of a space western, the idea of different shows are fine, but it's gotta feel different. It can't feel like you're giving me the same thing, like you're giving me more Mandalorian. You can only do so much of that.
I think that the Mandalorian itself would be a cool anthology type thing. So if you wrapped up the Mando's storyline in this, and perhaps the next 2 seasons go into Bo-Katan, and then the 2 seasons after that go into Boba Fett, but those characters can all still kind of have little guest appearances in the show. And I think that would be a good way to not oversaturate the market with the same type of show. I don't know how successful they are, but like when you look at the 911, it's like the Chicago 911, Texas 911, Lone Star State 911. I was like, oh my God, are these all the exact same show? And
or the CSI show.
I was just about to mention CSI. Yeah, all the variations of that. Yeah.
They are successful to a point, but they're all on different networks.
They are.
So and they're different time slots. So if you basically make all of this same stuff, I think there would be an oversaturation problem, but I don't have an issue with them exploring different avenues. So, like we said, the Force user have the Ahsoka show. I think having a Thrawn show would be awesome to explore Star Wars from the Imperial point of view. Kind of give us kind of a different take on Star Wars itself. I think that you look at the newest trilogy, does that a little bit because they talk about Kylo, but then it gets away from that. You know, Rey is the central protagonist. They focus on her, but I think having a show that literally just focuses on the Empire, I would like that a lot.
That could be interesting. I agree.
So I don't.
I thought this was a strong episode. Like I said, I am curious to, how it connected with people who weren't as familiar with some of the references. I think they did a good job, but we'll see how things go, further, because like Ahsoka has so much history tied directly to major Star Wars, she's directly tied to Vader. So will that come up, or will it not come up? I am curious to how that's gonna play. It's not necessary, arguably in the context of the Mandalorian story, but I don't know. She did know Yoda. She knows, she was there. So when she sees the child, she's definitely gonna have some thoughts about it because she's familiar with the Force and the Jedi and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think the concern is that she, like you mentioned, due to her past experiences, may kind of be like in the mood of I'm not a Jedi. Who you're looking for is Luke Skywalker, and we know how that turns out. So. That's the worry there. Like, we know what happens to the people that he trained.
Yeah. But it'll be interesting to see. And I'm very curious to where they're going with these things. I was very disappointed. Like I said, WandaVision got moved to next year. That sucks. But, what are you going to do? So right. I think that's going to be, I want to say they said 8 or 9 episodes when it airs, and it'll be weekly as well. And it's just based on some of the things I've read, it's going to be real trippy, sort of like Legion was, where I think they said the entire first episode was shot in front of a real live audience to get that old sitcom-y vibe. And so it's going to be a trippy show, but that should be cool. I'm into that. Anything else you guys want to talk about before we wrap this up?
Just reiterating that I think that we've kind of found our potential B plot for the show, that if it's not just about Baby Yoda, that, and him and his quest to, find a place for this child or finally decide to raise the child, that I think this Mandalorian war may be what the show may eventually turn out to be about, or since we're focusing so much on their traditions, once his helmet is finally removed and he's defeated in battle, which I imagine would happen with Moff Gideon, that, it would still then probably be about that war, but it'll be about that war personally for the Mandalorian that we're following, because it's him trying to reclaim his honor. And I think that the show will kind of go in that direction. I think we've got a lot of hints with this episode and the recap that we got in this episode that might be what we're going for. Eventually his helmet will be removed, and we'll have to deal with the ramifications of that on the show.
Yeah, I think that on a non-Mandalorian front, Disney Plus going forward, I'm very interested to see, what they announce on the 10th. I was super looking forward to WandaVision. Obviously, that's not a thing at the moment. I was super interested to find out about the Bucky and Falcon show, although I don't really care for Anthony Mackie all that much. Kind of looks like a praying mantis. But that's because of his facial hair. Like, why the hell does he cut it like that? It looks stupid. But anyway, I do think
you have very strong opinions about Anthony Mackie's facial hair.
It makes him look like he has a super weak jawline because he cuts it up above like his jaw. I was like, it looks dumb. I really
never
don't
heard that.
It looks bad, but I was, super interested to see where they were going to go with all that stuff. So I am curious to see what it is that they're doing next, Star Wars wise and Marvel wise. I love the service itself, but I really am curious as to how they're going to entice us to keep it.
It does need more content.
Yes.
And not just basically, drop it and then re-add it every October.
I'm gonna bitch real quick, and then we can get off. Yeah, Larry texted me he was having some issues with the app. Last week I tried loading the app, and it kept stuttering through the episode, and I had to shut it down and reload it again. I know I had a conversation with somebody else who was having some weird issues in the menus, like it was doing closed caption when they didn't want it to. Point being, I'm not saying that's the norm, but between me, Larry, and another person I know, there's been issues with the app. I have zero issues with any other app, whether it be Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime. So yeah, I don't know. Disney needs to work on that. Maybe it's an anomaly with us. I don't know, but have you had any issues with it, Spencer? Any stuttering or any just oddities with watching anything?
I haven't with Disney. I have issues with Hulu because I watch everything with closed caption. So sometimes on Hulu, caption will get ahead, and I hate it.
I have that issue too. Yeah, that happens to me also with Hulu. So that's got to be something with the service.
That definitely is there.
The next Ed will start playing, and I'm like, what the hell?
Well, it's funny. Disney owns Hulu, so there you go. We can continue shitting on Disney for this.
But I have any issues with the app at all. And definition has been super good. So I don't know if it's because I run everything through my Xbox, so I don't know if that's a nod to Microsoft or if it's just I've been looking
platform specific thing.
Wise, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That was weird to me because, like you said, I don't think I've ever had an issue with like Netflix. I'll use Netflix and Amazon Prime specifically. Those two, I know I've never had an issue. But yeah,
like the loading screen will come up and be like, issue 07632, and I don't know what that issue is, but
all right. Thanks for listening. We will see everyone next. The Undoing tomorrow. What's today? Saturday. Yeah, The Undoing tomorrow night, and then Fargo. There's only 3 episodes left on both of those shows. So, thanks for listening, and we'll see y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.